Welcome to today's video cast, which is part of a series on managing your operations in a COVID-19 world. I am your host, Jesse Matthews. In each of these video casts, the series we focus on specific topics that had been on many of our minds as businesses resume operations. In this discussion, we will be focusing on physical distancing. Today, I have two panelists joining me, Joe David and Tori McLaren, both industrial hygiene specialists with the Travelers Risk Control Organization. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Jesse. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, Jesse, thanks for having us.
Joe, I think about how different our world is than just a couple of months ago. A couple of months ago, if we said social distancing, no one would know what that means. We hear it and we see it every day now. Why has social distancing or physical distancing become such an important practice in today's world?
Well, Jesse, you're absolutely right. A few months ago, this was new to all of us. And you may have heard that the terms social distancing and physical distancing are typically used interchangeable. The Center for Disease Control, or CDC, defines physical distancing as maintaining a 6-foot separation distance between yourself and other people. And this is typically estimated to be about 2 arms length. However, my wingspan is over 6.5 feet. And Tori, what is your wingspan?
Mine is 5'7". I just measured it the other day.
See, so that's a variable estimate and an estimate. Me being an engineer and a science guy, I like to think about something more concrete. So I look at it as like 2 yardsticks or 2 shopping carts. Now that's the physical part. The actual physical separation distance between 2 people, or 6 feet. But there's also a social part to this too, which means refraining from gathering in group, staying out of crowded places, and avoiding mass gatherings such as professional sporting events or concerts.
Tori, I have been doing some virtual get-togethers with my friends, and last week one person asked, who decided 6 feet was the right number? Is there a reason for the 6-foot rule?
There is a reason for this 6-foot rule. So this virus is mainly spread through droplets that are expelled from a person's mouth and nose. When an infected person speaks, exhales, coughs, or sneezes, the droplets then become airborne and can travel about 3 to 6 feet before settling on surfaces due to gravity. So maintaining that space between people can help reduce exposure to those droplets. It really is everyone's responsibility to practice physical distancing to protect both themselves and other people.
So just stay 6 feet away from other people? That sounds easy enough, but maybe not as easy as it sounds. We're seeing many creative ways for different businesses to maintain social distancing, and that ranges from signs, postings on floors, and even monitors observing people. I would imagine that some workplaces like high occupancy office buildings may have challenges trying to accomplish that physical distancing. So what are some things that businesses can do where this may be a challenge?
Jesse, you're right. In some cases, it does sound easier than it actually is in reality. But to start with, you should perform a detailed review of your operations and the workstation configurations for each of your work environments. This may be different if it's an office occupancy versus a production floor. Then you need to think about how to limit the overall occupancy of a building or a construction job site at any single time. You can do this by allowing employees to continue working from home as we have for the past several months. You can also limit in-person meetings with non-critical third-party visitors, including sales representatives or vendors, and really conduct business virtually with these non-critical third parties.
But what about the people that do need to come into work, like production line workers or construction workers?
Jesse, for those people who must come to work, like you mentioned, production workers or construction workers, to get a job done, we need to think about different options. And one of those is, how about implementing staggered work shifts or rotating work shifts and staggered breaks so we don't have as many people congregating at one point in time? You also consider eliminating shared water coolers, eliminating visits from outside food vendors, and eliminating those shared services such as the community coffee bars that we're all used to. Another option is establishing flow patterns using arrows on the floor and or physical barriers to help maintain that 6 foot of distancing.
And to add to your last point there, Joe, about flow patterns and physical barriers, I like to think about grocery stores and how they've been managing physical distancing by marking aisles with arrows that indicate one-way traffic and using stickers on floors. They've also implemented physical barriers in the form of transparent plastic shields to provide a barrier between cashiers, tellers, or really any personnel who need to interact with customers. All these solutions help to maintain proper distancing.
Tori, that's an excellent point about the directional arrows, because it's much easier to maintain 6 foot of separation if we're traveling in the same direction versus if we're traveling counterflow.
So I have a follow-up question, Joe. What about directional stairwells? Can they be used as a method for physical distancing?
If you have multiple stairwells in your facility, you can designate some as ascending stairwells to go up in the building, and others can be designated as descending stairwells to go down in the building. This would help minimize crowding into elevators and crowds that accumulate while waiting for elevators. You can also assign various entrance doors to eliminate crowd surges at the start and end of shifts. In this manner, you could assign those individuals with the last names A through K to enter and exit through door A, and those with last names beginning L through Z to enter and exit through door B.
You know, one common challenge for almost every business is balancing staff meetings, shift startup meetings, or toolbox talks. And of course, this is where employees are gathering in big groups. Tori, how can physical distancing work in these instances?
Jesse, there are some options here. So consider changing to virtual meetings, or if in-person meetings are essential, try to limit meetings to 10 people or less while still maintaining physical distancing. You can also eliminate any non-critical meetings and use instant messaging or emails to convey shift-to-shift information.
Joe, I'd like to circle back to something you mentioned in the beginning. Perform a detailed review of operations and workstation configurations for each work environment. What are some changes that can be made with workstation configurations?
Jesse, as we discussed previously, this will take some planning. You can review floor plans and remove or reconfigure seats, furniture, and workstations as needed, like remove extra seating from lobbies and other gathering areas. This will eliminate an accumulation of people in one area and help to maintain that 6 foot of separation.
And again, Joe, if I could add to that, in some cases, like offices with cubicle arrangements, reconfiguration may not be an option. You may have to rely on solutions like staggering or rotating work schedules, so that every other workstation is occupied on any given day. Now, some offices have gone to open office concepts. That's really popular now. So in addition to distancing occupied workstations, companies with these open office layouts may also want to think about installing actual physical barriers, like those transparent plastic panels, between workstations.
A common practice in construction is for employees to travel to work sites in the same truck. Other businesses have employees traveling together in cars as well and in trucks. What are some things that should be considered to still get people to work and maintain physical distancing?
Well, Jesse, to maintain physical distancing within vehicles, you could increase the spacing required in the vehicle by marking the seats that indicate proper distancing between passengers and only use those seats. Or you can simply limit the number of passengers per ride. But again, this is going to take some planning because now you may need extra vehicles to transport all your employees to the job site, or this may be a time when staggered work shifts will work so you can get the people to the job. Another thing to consider, when you're dealing with a single cab pickup truck, you cannot maintain a 6 foot of separation distance. In this case, policies may need to be changed so only one person rides per vehicle. But if that is not a feasible option, then you must consider the use of cloth face coverings while in the vehicle together.
Tori, we're social, right? We like to gather. we're used to having a certain degree of freedom when it comes to things like walking around and talking about our workplaces. So what are the things that employees can be thinking about with regards to physical distancing?
So something else that employers can consider is reducing employee wandering throughout facilities and job sites by assigning employees to designated work areas. And then also making sure that employees have the supplies that they need in their designated work areas. Signage or visual cues can be used to assign employees to specific areas. That way, employees know which areas they can try to stick to. And an example is for construction sites. Crews can use color-coded stickers on hard hats, assigning them to specific work areas to help prevent job site roaming. And they can also take advantage of wearable technology, like proximity devices typically worn on hard hats or wristbands, to monitor employee location and track physical distancing throughout a work shift. And then thinking about office buildings, employers can look at using key cards to control access to certain floors or closed areas to help minimize employees wandering throughout a building.
Another challenge is tasks or workstations that require two employees to be in proximity, like two-person lifts. What can we do to protect our employees in situations where physical distancing or the use of barriers just isn't possible?
Jesse, as you indicated, two-person lifts are fairly common in both industry and construction, and you can look at this as short-term and long-term solutions. The short-term solution may be to use face coverings and gloves with the enforcement of hand hygiene in order to get the job done. But let's remember that face coverings are not considered a substitute for physical distancing, and glove use is not considered a substitute for good hand hygiene. A longer-term solution may be to review the work task with the goal of eliminating the need for a two-person lift, and this can be done by using a mechanical lifting aid or redesigning the process itself. Another thing to consider, we may have some other value added by redesigning the process, because we can eliminate potential manual material handling related injuries, which are pretty common in two-person lifts.
Regarding PPE and hand hygiene for our listeners, we will have 2 additional video casts regarding these topics as part of the series. Joe, I have one more question, and it's regarding crews working outside. Do they still need to be as concerned about physical distancing if they are outdoors?
Jesse, that's a question I hear quite often. And as Tori indicated, the primary source of transmission is the exhalation of droplets from an infected person to another person nearby. So even if we're working outside, that 6 foot of physical distancing is critical. When we're working outside also, it may be easier to maintain that 6 foot of physical distancing because we have more space. However, in some cases, like we talked about before for the two-person lift, that may not be possible. So we still need to consider other forms of personal protective equipment when needed, such as the face coverings or physical barriers. But the answer to your question in short is yes, 6 foot separation distance outdoors is critical.
Thanks, Joe. This has been a great discussion regarding physical distancing. Joe and Tori, you have given our listeners various options to consider as businesses resume operations. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for other video casts in this series. Please also remember, Travelers has additional resources for COVID-19 to help support and guide you and your organizations.